Not. My debts double, and my income seems to sizzle away under the influence of a hot, sleepless night. And it was just here that a certain awful thing saved me from the insanity which is a certain result of parboiled insomnia. It was about the 16th of July, which, as I remember reading in an extra edition of the Evening Bun, got out to mention the fact was the hottest 16th of July known in 38 years. I had retired at 7:30, after dining lightly upon a cold salmon and a gallon of iced tea, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to get down to first principles at once, and remove my clothing, and sort of spread myself over all the territory I could, which is a thing you can't do in a library, or even in a white and gold parlour. If a man were constructed like a machine, as he really ought to be strictly comfortable, a machine that could be taken apart like an 8-day clock, I should have taken myself apart, putting one section of myself on the roof, another part in the spare room, hanging a third on the clothesline in the yard, and so on, leaving my head in the icebox. But unfortunately we have to keep ourselves together in this life, hence I did the only thing one can do, and retired, and incidentally spread myself over some freshly baked bedclothing. There was some relief from the heat, but not much. I had been roasting, and while my sensations were somewhat like those which I imagine come to a plank shad when he first finds himself spread out over the plank, there was mitigation. My temperature fell off from 167 to about 163, which is not quite enough to make a man absolutely content. Suddenly, however, I began to shiver. There was no breeze, but I began to shiver.
It is getting cooler, I thought, as the chill came on, and I rose and looked at the thermometer. It still registered the highest possible point, and the mercury was rebelliously trying to break through the top of the glass tube and take a stroll on the roof. That's queer, I said to myself. It's as hot as ever, and yet I'm shivering. I wonder if my goose is cooked. I've certainly got a chill. I jumped back into bed and pulled the sheet up over me, but still I shivered. Then I pulled the blanket up, but the chill continued. I couldn't seem to get warm again. Then came the counterpane, and finally I had to put on my bathrobe, a fuzzy woolen affair, which in midwinter I had sometimes found too warm for comfort. Even then I was not sufficiently bundled up, so I called for an extra blanket, 2 Afghans, and a hot water bag. Everyone in the house thought I had gone mad, and I wondered myself if perhaps I hadn't, when all of a sudden I perceived, off in the corner, the awful thing, and perceiving it, I knew all. I was being haunted, and the physical repugnance of which I have spoken was on. The cold shiver, the invariable accompaniment of the ghostly visitant, had come, and I assure you I was never so glad of anything in my life. It has always been said of me by my critics that I am raw. I was afraid that after that night they would say I was half-baked, and I would far rather be the one than the other. And it was the awful thing that saved me. Realizing this, I spoke to it gratefully. "You are a heaven-born gift on a night like this," said I, rising and walking to its side. "I am glad to be of service to you," the awful thing replied, smiling at me so yellowly that I almost wished the author of the Blue Button of Cowardice could have seen it. "It's very good of you," I put in. "Not at all," replied the thing. "You are the only man I know who doesn't think it necessary to prevaricate about ghosts every time he gets an order for a Christmas story. There have been more lies told about us than any other class of things in existence, and we are getting a trifle tired of it. We may have lost our corporeal existence, but some of our sensitivity still remains." "Well," said I, rising and lighting the gas logs, for I was on the very verge of congealment, "I am sure I am pleased if you like my stories." "Oh, as for that, I don't think much of them," said the awful thing, with a purple display of candour which amused me, although I cannot say that I relished it. "But you never lie about us. You are not at all interesting, but you are truthful. And we spooks hate libellers. Just because one happens to be a thing is no reason why writers should libel it, and that's why I've always suspected you. We regard you as a sort of spook Boswell. You may be dull and stupid, but you tell the truth. And when I saw you in imminent danger of becoming a mere grease spot, owing to the fearful heat, I decided to help you through. That's why I'm here. Go to sleep now. I'll stay here and keep you shivering until daylight anyhow. I'd stay longer, but we are always laid at sunrise." "Like an egg," I said sheepily. "Tut," said the ghost. "Go to sleep. If you talk, I'll have to go." And so I dropped off to sleep as softly and sweetly as a tired child. In the morning I awoke refreshed. The rest of my family were prostrated, but I was fresh. The awful thing was gone, and the room was warming up again, and if it had not been for the tinkling ice in my water pitcher I should have suspected it was all a dream. And so throughout the whole sizzling summer the friendly spectre stood by me and kept me cool, and I haven't a doubt that it was because of his good offices in keeping me shivering on those fearful August nights that I survived the season, and came to my work in the autumn as fit as a fiddle, so fit indeed that I have not written a poem since that has not struck me as being the very best of its kind. And if I can find a publisher who will take the risk of putting those poems out, I shall unequivocally and without hesitation acknowledge, as I do here, my debt of gratitude to my friends in the spirit world. Manifestations of this nature, then, are harmful, as I have already observed, only when a person who is haunted yields to his physical impulses. Fought stubbornly inch by inch with the will, they can be subdued, and often they are a boon. I think I have proved both these points. It took me a long time to discover the facts, however, and my discovery came about in this way. It may perhaps interest you to know how I made it. I encountered at the English home of a wealthy friend at one time a presence of an insulting turn of mind. It was at my friend Jarley's little baronial hall, which he had rented from the Earl of Brookdale the year Mrs. Jarley was presented at court. The Countess of Brookdale's social influence went with the chateau for a slightly increased rental, which was why the Jarleys took it. I was invited to spend a month with them, not so much because Jarley is fond of me as because Mrs. Jarley had a sort of idea that, as a writer, I might say something about their newly acquired glory in some American Sunday newspaper, and Jarley laughingly assigned me to the haunted chamber, without at least one of which no baronial hall in the old country is considered worthy of the name. "It will interest you more than any other," Jarley said, "and if it has a ghost, I imagine you will be able to subdue him." I gladly accepted the hospitality of my friend, and was delighted at his consideration in giving me the haunted chamber, where I might pursue my investigations into the subject of phantoms undisturbed. Deserting London then for a time, I ran down to Brookdale Hall, and took up my abode there with half a dozen other guests. Jarley, as usual since his sudden gold fall, as Wilkins called it, did everything with a lavish hand. I believe a man could have got diamonds on toast if he had chosen to ask for them. However, this is apart from my story. I had occupied the haunted chamber about 2 weeks before anything of importance occurred, and then it came, and a more unpleasant, ill-mannered spook never floated in the ether. He materialized about 3 a.m., and was unpleasantly sulphurous to one's perceptions. He sat upon the divan in my room, holding his knees in his hands, leering and scowling upon me as though I were the intruder, and not he. "Who are you?" I asked excitedly, as in the dying light of the log fire he loomed grimly up before me. "None of your business," he replied insolently, showing his teeth as he spoke. "On the other hand, who are you? This is my room, and not yours, and it is I who have the right to question. If you have any business here, well and good. If not, you will oblige me by removing yourself, for your presence is offensive to me." "I am a guest in the house," I answered, restraining my impulse to throw the inkstand at him for his impudence, "and this room has been set apart for my use by my host." "One of the servants' guests, I presume," he said insultingly, his livid lavender-like lip uncurling into a haughty sneer, which was maddening to a self-respecting worm like myself. I rose up from my bed, and picked up the poker to bat him over the head, but again I restrained myself. It will not do to quarrel, I thought. I will be courteous if he is not, thus giving a dead Englishman a lesson which wouldn't hurt some of the living. "No," I said, my voice tremulous with wrath. "No, I am the guest of my friend Mr. Jarley, an American who—" "Same thing," observed the intruder with a yellow sneer. "Race of low-class animals, those Americans. Only fit for gentlemen's stables, you know." This was too much. A ghost may insult me with impunity, but when he tackles my people he must look out for himself. I sprang forward with an ejaculation of wrath, and with all my strength struck at him with the poker, which I still held in my hand. If he had been anything but a ghost he would have been split vertically from top to toe, but as it was the poker passed harmlessly through his misty make-up, and rent a great gash 2 feet long in Jarley's divan. The yellow sneer faded from his lips, and a maddening blue smile took its place. "Humph!" he observed nonchalantly. "What a useless ebullition, and what a vulgar display of temper! Really, you are the most humorous insect I have yet encountered. From what part of the States do you come? I am truly interested to know in what kind of soil exotics of your peculiar kind are cultivated. Are you part of the fauna or the flora of your tropical states, or what?" And then I realized the truth.
There is no physical method of combating a ghost which can result in his discomfiture.